Welcome to the Waiting Warriors podcast. I'm Michelle Bowler. I'm an Army wife of over 8 years, a mom of 4 little girls, and a huge believer that supporting your military or first responder loved one is way easier if you connect with a community. Along with sharing some of my insights and journey, I have set out to interview waiting warriors around the world so we can all learn about their triumphs and their struggles. Together, we can learn to do more than just survive. We can thrive, and that is what being a waiting warrior is all about. Hey, Waiting Warriors, welcome to the Waiting Warriors podcast. Another week on the show. This week we have Joe with us from Joe My Gosh. If you have ever Pinterest or Googled anything military spouse, this is Joe. Welcome to the show, Joe.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And real fast, before we get into the interview, I have to show you guys this shirt. If you're just listening, just believe my depiction. That's not the right word. Description. I found this awesome shirt. It is from a company called Her Hero Jewelry, and it says military spouse, and then it's like wrong way. The ingredients list, like it says patience, elbow grease, courage, tolerance, dash of adventure, and then serve with pride. It is super comfy. I just really want to share with you guys good military spouse companies, and this is one of them, Her Hero Jewelry. And it's like, like when you find a good t-shirt, you're like, you kind of just need to tell everybody because it's soft and comfy and what it says is like cute and fun. So that's what this is. But let's get into Joe. Joe is married to a Navy veteran who served for 6.5 years with a year-long deployment, and that just deployments. She's the social media manager for military.com, the owner and writer of Joe My Gosh, and her husband own 2 coffee shops. I'm going to say it wrong. Swatera Coffee in Central Pennsylvania. Hi, welcome. I'm like, it's so cool because I've read so much of your stuff. I know who you are. The funny things about meeting people that you've seen on the internet, then you get to talk to them.
No, I totally get it. I feel that way every time. Of course, now we really can't meet in person, but
Yeah.
anytime I've ever been at a conference or a spouse get together or something, I'm like, oh my gosh, and I fangirl, and then everyone's like, that's a little weird. I'm like, I can't help it. You're my people.
Yeah, it's like, no, but you don't understand what you said about that thing I really connected with. So why aren't you connecting with me? It's always fun like that. The funny things about military spouse life, but also internet life. Cause I don't know. I feel like as a military spouse, I've just learned to sometimes I'm really good at it and sometimes I'm really bad at it. I just jump in because okay, well, we got 5 days, so let's become really good friends. That's all
Yeah.
I normally have. So
And I think that's one of the wonderful things about the military spouse community, specifically the military spouse blogging community. So many people I've watched their babies grow up, and I've seen them, get married or move places. And when we meet, we're like, oh my gosh, how can it be that this is the first 30 seconds that we're meeting? We've been friends for 7 years, we've been friends for 8 years, and we're finally in the same zip code. And there's just that instant connection and that instant if you're I feel the same way about my friends from college. It doesn't matter how long we've been apart. All of a sudden you're back together, and it's the gang's back, and it's just such a wonderful loving feeling.
yeah, I love the military spouse community like that. So let's get into your experience as a military spouse. You said you were in for 6.5 years, but a year-long deployment. What was that like? Because I also knew you have a kind of different experience because you didn't have kids. So how, I don't know, just go from the beginning. What has your experience been like?
Just go for it. Yeah, I think I've had a kind of Different experience than probably a lot of people have.
Mhm.
And I think every time I say that to somebody, someone else says, "Oh no, that's similar to mine." Because I think a lot of times we assume things about military spouses
Mhm.
that necessarily aren't true for everybody.
Yeah.
So for me, my husband and I knew each other in college, just did not date because we like to make things very difficult. Ended up, I actually ended up reconnecting with him, where I was friends with his brother too. His brother shared that John had joined the military, sent his, like posted his boot camp address on Facebook. I just happened to see it. I wrote John a note. He wrote me one back. Once he was able to, I mean, we exchanged letters a bunch of times. Once he was
Mhm.
able to, he would call me and like we talked for like 5 or 6 hours at a shot. Like it got very intense very quickly, because we had been friends in college.
Yeah.
And then we dated for a year. He asked, and that was long distance relationship.
Right.
Um, he asked me to marry him not even a month before he deployed to Afghanistan. And so then we were engaged for the year that he was
Mhm.
in Afghanistan, and got married about a month after he got home, which now looking back on it, I'm like, wow, that's insane that I planned a wedding um, with a date that I didn't even know was going to
Yeah.
be certain. I was super naive. That's
How
all I
do
can say.
you do that? Like, how do you reserve anything?
I just did it and just was like, yeah, he's totally going to be home by this time. And now looking back, I'm like, wow, that was crazy.
You planned the wedding to be a certain date even though you didn't necessarily know he'd be back.
Well, we had a good idea of when
Okay.
he was going to be back, and we did give some buffer time. And he ended up
Mhm.
coming home a little bit later, not a lot later.
Yeah.
So it ended up being about a month after he came home. But still, now like the older, wiser me is like, what'd you do?
I would never plan anything like that big, but I think that's because I've had so many separations. But
Sure.
that's, like, kind of the funny thing. Austin and I were talking about that the other day, is, like, how funny is it that you make certain decisions and it's like, "Okay, was I naive or was I just braver?" I don't know which one which one is it?
Maybe just a healthy mix of both.
Yeah, that's a fair thing. Okay, so
Yeah.
you guys get married and then was that the year deployment or was that when the
No, he deployed for a year when we were engaged,
okay.
and so then a bunch of things happened. I left my job. I had been working as an English teacher in Baltimore City for 5 years.
Mhm,
So I left my job to go across state lines and live with John. Um, and so I ended up being a spouse who, was careerless,
mhm,
not really sure what I was going to do because at that time licensing issues were difficult. There was like a backlog of licensing stuff. It was expensive.
mhm.
And then we didn't know where we were going to PCS to next. So trying to get like it just didn't make sense. It didn't make financial sense. It didn't make sense on like a just a time management,
Mhm.
going through everything. So yeah, so I ended up switching careers actually. I haven't been in the classroom since I left Baltimore City.
Yeah.
Um, during John's deployment actually is when I started Joe My Gosh. So I had spent a year writing Joe My Gosh, kind of just for me, not really for anybody else. And Pinterest showed up, and I say this to people and they laugh, but it's like so true. I went from having an audience of my mom reading my blog posts and like watching me and being like, "That's so sweet" or "That's so cute," to like
That's so
one
funny.
day, right? Um, like literally I woke up one day and I looked at my analytics and I had 30,000 people reading Joe My Gosh.
Yeah.
And I was like, what?
Mhm.
So yeah, so that was Pinterest. Somebody had pinned something and then all of a sudden Joe My Gosh content was everywhere.
Yeah.
for that time. And so I kind of built Joe My Gosh while I was unemployed. I did a lot of other things. I worked as a national park gift shop cashier. I was a secret shopper. You know, I dealt with a lot of stuff because, you know, I had my bachelor's, I had my master's, I had
Yeah.
5 years of experience. So I dealt with a lot of like self worth issues and, of course, like,
Mhm.
loans and all these kinds of things. And then I kind of got I like fell into freelance writing,
Mhm.
which was kind of crazy because I'd always wanted to be a writer who got paid to write, and I just didn't know how to do it. So, like, because of the military spouse community, a spouse said, "Hey, like I saw Joe, my gosh, do you think you could write this stuff?"
Mhm.
And so I had a freelance writing career for quite a few years that translated into a bunch of full-time jobs that led me to military.com.
Yeah.
So, and I've been working remote for, yeah, for a long time now. So that's kind of, you know, in between there. We PCS, which we did a Diddy move, and people say that we're crazy for that too. We just like to do stuff the really hard way, I guess.
No, it just life is too mundane if you just go the easy route. Why not do the hard things? We're this
Right.
we seem to choose the harder way for some reason. And now you guys are in not Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Mhm.
Um, and you have your coffee shops. It's like a very veteran proud company. You're the ones who have like the kits that people can buy, right?
Yeah, we have a coffee shop in a box. Yep.
Yeah.
Which
So cute.
came right out of the pandemic, actually, as a way to keep the lights on,
Mhm.
especially with like the first shutdown
Yeah.
and figuring out how to do that. So yeah, we actually, and it's kind of funny. Swatera Coffee Company, John dreamed about it. Like he dreamed it up when he was serving in Afghanistan, and he was kind
Mhm.
of at the crossroads of his Navy career, trying to figure out if he was going to stay in, if he was going to transition out, what we wanted for our family. And so he actually started writing the business plan while he was deployed to Afghanistan in the little tiny bits of free time he had. So, you
Mhm.
know, we like to say that it doesn't seem like it's kind of an interesting origin story that a coffee shop in central Pennsylvania in some tiny little rural towns has a story that begins in Afghanistan.
Yeah. That doesn't happen every day.
No.
I like it. So how did you guys transition out? Because I know that can be really rocky. Even like thinking about leaving can be really scary. What was that both for you guys like as a couple, but also for you? Because like the military is a super stable career, and then you were unemployed for a while. I mean, by the time you guys left, you had like employment. But what I mean, even just like health insurance, right? Everybody's like, "But the health insurance," what was
Right.
that for you?
Right. Yeah. You know,
Mhm,
for us, it was a decision that didn't come lightly. We spent a lot of time talking about it, praying about it, figuring out at a very tactical level what we would need to do to make it happen.
mhm,
Um, so, you know, and whenever we talk about our transition, like I have to put up like a note and say like we don't have children, and I think it's a very different experience when you do have children, because you know we were able to make a lot of decisions just based on John and myself,
mhm.
instead of having to think also about, you know, healthcare for our children, schooling for our children, you know, all of those kinds of things. We didn't even have a dog at that point. So we were really kind of just like making decisions just based on the two of us.
Yeah,
Um, Another thing that really eased the transition for us was that at the time of transition, I did have a job with benefits,
yeah,
which was really did create that bridge for us, because it wasn't like all of a sudden he transitioned out, and then there was no paycheck, no health care, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so we really, I think we tried to put in place things that would make it easier. We financially planned for transition. So, but way before, he started, um, and kind of started thinking about like what the coffee shop looked like. We had been saving for the coffee shop from our first year of marriage. So
Oh,
it was something that we really did try to be really strategic about.
yeah. Yeah. Was it kind of hard to balance though, like, you want to dream as a couple, but then you also, like, have to be realistic? I'm curious, like, are you the dreamer? Was he the dreamer? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
do you guys balance each other out?
it's a good question. I think we're dreamers at different points,
Yeah.
like, when we so during our wedding, there was this kind of these few moments that I think maybe encapsulates kind of our relationship. Um, at one point, I started getting teary and like a little bit emotional,
Mhm.
and John was totally cool. Calm, like totally like no emotion, just happy, right?
Mhm.
Um, and then like I think we came and we sat down together, and the pastor started giving his sermon, and John started getting choked up, and I was like, no, like, suck it up. Because I feel like it's one of those things, like when one of us is down, the other one tries to, like,
Mhm.
pull the other up, and so we kind of have that give and take usually. Um so I think we kind of do that in our dreaming as well, where like John will have this like kind of tangential dream about like where he wants to take the coffee shop. And then I'm the one to like pull back and say, like, hey, like, let's think about the tactical stuff. Like, can we really do this?
Mhm.
And then I'll have a dream like that I want to see. And he'll kind of, I don't want to say bring me back to reality, but we gut check each other,
Yeah.
which was really nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you have Joe My Gosh, but you also, oh, sorry, shifting. Like, you've done so much with Joe My Gosh. You just finished Pillar, which you guys should have heard me talk about if you're listening. That was an awesome free resource for anybody going through a deployment. Like, it's not, I don't know. I don't want to like say it's not like you've only done this, because if somebody is doing that, like, I don't want to put like a box and like judge what people are doing, right? Because everybody has different seasons and different things, but like, you guys are doing awesome things. And I know, like, but sometimes I feel like as spouses it's like, okay, but we have, you dream, but then you have the reality checks, you know what I mean? Like, so I love that you guys let each other dream, and then you guys go and do all this really cool stuff.
Well, sometimes, and then sometimes we're like, "Wait, like that, no, we're not gonna do that." Um, and Michelle, you're so right. Like, I think it depends on your situation, where you are in life, your seasons, all of that stuff. And I feel like when I tell this, like the story of like how everything happened, it sounds like it's all roses and it all fell into place. Or, I dealt with a lot of self worth issues. I hadn't realized when we got married and the paycheck stopped for my job, and like all of a sudden I was unemployed,
Mhm.
how devastating that would be. Like once it was like, oh, summer vacation, we got married in July. And so like I didn't feel that transition, because normally as a teacher, I was like working on lesson planning, but I wasn't going into the classroom every day.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, like my friends who were my colleagues are going back to work. Like my parents, who are both teachers, are going back to work. And I am sitting in an apartment in a town where I had like one friend, and going like, oh my gosh. And a month after we got married, we totaled both of our cars. which sounds crazy. It was actually like John had this real old junker and the brakes went out and it like they considered it totaled.
Um,
And then the electricity went out in my car in a really scary
oh,
moment. But they consider, they for insurance purposes, they
yeah,
consider it totaled. So all of a sudden, like now I'm sitting in an apartment, not like without a paycheck. John is at C school. And so he's like gone for like 12 or 13 hours a day.
yeah,
And I don't even have wheels. Like
yeah.
that's just, and like we downsized to one car because
Mhm.
quite honestly, we couldn't afford to buy two cars. And so there
Sure.
was like a lot of stuff. And I think that so often as military spouses, like we don't talk about the hard stuff in a realistic way.
Yeah.
Like sat in our apartment and cried. Like I sat on our bathroom floor when I realized I had to share a bathroom with a boy for the rest of my life and cried and was like, are you serious? Like this is life now? And that's not to say that I don't love my husband or anything like that, but like, you know, um, those changes are so hard. And for military spouses, it's like change after change after change. And even though the changes happen and we know they're happening, like I think we need to give ourselves the time to say, like, it's okay to grieve these things, or it's okay not
Mhm.
to be like super chirpy and like, bloom where you're planted every single time. Because sometimes it feels like planted in like lava, you
Yeah.
know? And you feel like you're burning up rather than actually doing anything. And I think sometimes that's okay too.
Yeah. Ooh, let's go in on that, like, metaphor. Lava, volcano, like, your life literally explodes everywhere, like, it's awesome and beautiful getting married, but then there's always that moment, like, after where you're like, "Okay, my life literally feels on fire," and then the lava comes down, but it's not until it cools down, like, it has to be and explode, and then it cools down, and then the land's all fertile, and you can make something awesome. That's a good metaphor. I love
Yeah, I
like,
totally meant all of the stuff
yeah,
you said afterwards. It sounded brilliant, so
mhm,
I
yeah.
claim.
I know you. You were like, "Oh, let's plant this seed and let it sprout in everybody's mind," because you're the awesome writer that you are. But what were those things though? Because, like, we don't talk about it a lot, but we should, because everybody has that moment where it's almost like we have moments of like, I used to know what I did with myself. Do you know what I mean? Like, I woke up in the morning and I knew what I was gonna do, and now you don't. You know what I mean? Like, how do you it is kinda like it's rebuilding your day, it's rebuilding yourself. How did you do that? Or in your much wiser self now, how would you suggest people do that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's all like about renegotiating who you are and what you do and like your place in the world. At least for me, it was. And
Mhm,
obviously can't speak to everyone's experiences. But for me, like I took great pride and great worth um, in myself for being an English teacher. I taught juniors and seniors American literature. I wrote an AP curriculum for AP Lit and Language, which hadn't been done at my school before. Like, I loved it. I loved my kids. I, slept, breathed, ate English teacher stuff.
mhm,
And so that I think that was the first thing that was difficult, which is like, a teacher's day is super structured to begin with. Like, so like my structure was gone. My sense of community was completely gone. Um, the it was scary because like it was like, what does the future hold now? Because we at that point when we had gotten married, like we knew that for a couple of years I wouldn't be teaching. So like what do I do? Like, do I go for
mhm.
licensing? All of those kinds of things. Um, and I knew about myself, which it didn't help at the time, but I know, like, I don't do well with like with life changes. It takes me a while, which, now that I think about it, like, wow, like, and you married someone in the military, you
Yeah,
don't do well with change. Like, but, um, but like even when I was in college and I was um like a guide in our marching band, like my friends would tease me like at the end, like our senior year, every like every football game, they were like, Joanna, it's the last time we'll have a third last football game. Like, don't you want to cry about that? You know, like it's the second to the third last time that we'll be on the bus together. Like all of these things, like, you know, it's just part of who I am.
Mhm.
And I wish I could tell myself, like me now, tell myself then that like embrace, just enjoy the changes, embrace it because it is ephemeral. And even though it feels like it's going to be forever, it's really not. Like, go enjoy the beach at Virginia Beach a little bit more. Like, don't sit in your apartment and cry. Like, I guess that's the point, you know, it's things work out. Um, and just trust and experience what you're here to trust and experience.
Yeah, that's yeah, that's awesome. It's like we I think it's really easy for us to like literally just see and feel, like the bathroom floor or wherever it is that you're breaking down and you're crying or you're feeling alone. Like it's so easy to feel that. And I think, we're kind of talking about like the newbies, right? But I know I've experienced this in the last like year or two a few times where it's like, okay, but we've been doing this forever. But you can still I think it's normal to have those moments every however many years of like your things have totally changed, especially with 2020. Like things have totally changed. The way we lived our lives will probably never be the same. But if we just like do what you said and can like know that it's not this isn't going to last forever, but there are still things that we can enjoy, you know, even if it's not the beach. I don't know if those are open right now. Depends on where you are, apparently.
Right.
But like we all have something like there is the outside. There are trees, there are birds to listen to. There are people that we can still love on and FaceTime if we need to. Like there's some sort of bright side, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, quite honestly, like even sitting here, I'm like, dang it, Joanna, like you need to take your own advice now.
Mhm.
Because I think it is really hard, especially when you're experiencing those really big emotions or like you feel like you're in a tunnel and there is no light
Mhm.
on the other side. Like every other day during this pandemic, man, I'm like, when is this gonna end? Like, you know, I just want to see my sister or whatever it is.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it is really hard when you're in those moments to say like it's not going to last forever. This is just like in Kimmy Schmidt, like you can do anything for 10 seconds, right? Like,
Yep.
um, and it's hard. It's so hard. And I don't know if anyone can really like do that all the time, you know, because you do need to feel things and you do need to feel sad or happy or, you know, feel those emotions too.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I don't say that to, like, look on the brighter side, meaning don't feel. I've I've just learned, like, I need to feel it, but then there is a point where it's like, okay, it's been felt. You know what
Mhm,
I mean? Like, it's kinda like when you actually let yourself cry. For me, it's like my body takes a deep breath after a few minutes. It's like,
mhm,
"Okay, now like my brain can actually process and I can look for those brighter sides." But it's like that moment you kind of have a choice. Like you either continue to cry and look at all the crap and look at all the stupid news that just wants us to be miserable all the time and is clickbait and it's not actual news, it's just, but or you can say, okay, like, am I going to go outside? Am I going to have a dance party in my kitchen to give myself some sort of endorphins and happiness, like we just
mhm.
have those two choices. But it's after you cry. Um Okay, so last question then. What is your key to thriving? Because we talked about like all the like the bad stuff happens, but what's your key to overall thriving that you want to share with your fellow waiting warriors?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think the thing that I've learned over my experiences as a military spouse and now as a veteran spouse, um, is that there is no one way to experience military life. There is no one typical military family. There's not no one typical military spouse. And every time you assume something about someone, you're like automatically going to be wrong on some level, right? And so I think listen to the bloggers you're reading or the podcasts you're listening to. Look at the resources, be in your FRG groups, or whatever your support system is in the military community. But then at the end of the day, take that advice and use what makes sense for you.
Mhm,
I think at the beginning of our military life, like my family was not military. Like I knew nothing about military life.
mhm.
I didn't really have any friends who were in the military. So I had like zero understanding of anything. And so I was really like, I would take all of this information, be like, okay, like that makes sense. That makes sense. I'm going to do all this stuff. And then I ended up feeling really terrible about myself because it wasn't authentic to me. It wasn't authentic to like our relationship. It wasn't authentic to the way we live our lives. And it works for other people. And that's awesome. But it just didn't work for us. And I spent so much time like feeling bad about that. And I wish that, you know, it's something I say on Joe My Gosh a lot of times, like take this information, keep what makes sense to you and like let the other stuff go.
Yeah,
Because like, even when it comes to like care packages,
yeah,
like you don't have to make intricate, like I love intricate care packages, but you don't have to make them intricate. Like you
yeah,
can, you know, the point is they're made with love. They don't have to be works of art. They don't have to cost 70 or $80.
yeah,
Like do what makes sense for you and then be okay with that.
yeah.
Because really at the end of the day, that's what matters. Like you're not putting on a show for people on Instagram or on Facebook, like, or even your next door neighbor or the spouses club or
Mhm.
whatever. Like as long as it's working for your family, like that's enough. And that's okay.
Amen to that. And side note, guys, I didn't send any care packages because Austin didn't want them. And at first I was like, no, but like, that's how you feel loved. He's like, no, it's not. I was like, oh, but I thought that's what I was supposed to do. It was
Yeah.
a legit conversation. But I was like, but there's all these care packages and that's what everybody says and all this kind of stuff. So that was one of the lessons I learned. And as you were saying, it's like take everything like there's no one way. That is exactly why I've done, oh, how many are we at? We're at like 80, over 80 episodes of interviews with different people because I could have just found like it would have been really easy and actually probably a lot easier to just find 10 people and talk to 10 people about all the millions of different things that like we go through, right? But like that doesn't actually help everybody because everybody has different things and you can take one golden nugget from what nugget from Joe, you can take one from Kristen Groves, you can take one from Hannah Mars, you can take one from like every single one. And it's a different, like everybody's going to be different because you are different. And we're all super freaking awesome, but also so different. And it's like, just take what you need and the rest, just sweep it aside. I like it. And I love like that's one of the reasons why I love your blog because it's like all the time. If not almost the every blog post that you say that, like just take what you need or at least you mention
Probably
it.
probably not every blog post, but it is a running theme.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes there are some things like you absolutely need to adhere to. Like I
Right.
wrote a blog post. People ask me, like, someone asked me, like, do you really get mail about this? Like, yes, I wrote a blog post about whether or not you can send weapons in the mail, like in care packages, and
Yeah.
yes, I've gotten those questions. Like, no, you actually do have to
Yeah.
follow. Like,
You have to follow.
don't send guns or bullets in the mail. That is a big no-no. That's not something you can take or leave.
No.
But for the other non-extreme things, like, yeah, it's something that I think is important, because I do think, especially because military spouses live so much of their lives online, whether it's staying connected with family members back home, staying connected with friends who, were at a duty station and then are somewhere else now. Like, it's easy to feel so inadequate all the time because you see what everybody else is doing,
Yeah.
and their opinions and where they're going and the clothing they're wearing. And, even if you like, even if they're not trying to make you feel bad, like, sometimes at some point
Yeah.
it might work on you. And I think that it's just important to remember, like, that's okay. Do what you need to do for your family.
Yeah. Wise words. Wise words. And thank you so much, Joe, for coming on. Guys, go check out her blog. I feel like, I don't know, if you've been on Pinterest or Google even, like, you probably know her, but if you like pretty much any question that you have, from TRICARE to, I don't know, everything, like care packages or not care packages, if you're cool, like, don't send them. But everything, check out Joe. My gosh, if you are in Pennsylvania, go say hi to her. Enjoy some coffee that, like, originated. I'm quoting that. It's the coffee beans aren't from Afghanistan. The story just started in Afghanistan. But that's awesome. Or check out military.com. That's also a really good resource if you haven't heard of it. I feel like maybe everybody else has heard
It's
of
a
that.
military news website,
Yeah.
with, yeah, so breaking news all the way to, things like care package requirements and deadlines and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. But then again, it's like, oh, I think everybody knows it, but I've also been in, so like I forget all the things that were kind of mind blowing. But thank you again. Say thank you. Let her know if anything kind of was a golden nugget for you and something you'll take away. Joe, thank you so much for being on the show. And Waiting Warriors out there, just remember, just because it is hard doesn't mean it has to be miserable. Have a great week, guys. Hey, Waiting Warriors, if you are heading towards a deployment, in the middle of deployment, or you're just a military spouse honestly trying to do their best and educate yourself, I have created something with you in mind. It is called 3 Ways to Set Up Your Marriage for a Successful Deployment. I know deployments are tough. They are. But it doesn't mean it has to ruin your relationship. So go to subscribepage.com/ 3 ways to set up your marriage for a successful deployment. I'll put the link in the show notes. Or right now on my website, thewaitingwarriors.com, there is a pretty little yellow button in the top right just waiting for you to click on it. Enjoy.